Okay, so we've got these walls which give us the outline of the building, but now that we know that the passageway can be retained between the buildings, and so here you can see how it used to be where there was something over it, and yeah, it's all been opened up a bit more now, which is nice. And so what that means is that firstly, we can treat this wall as a party wall, which it would be almost definitely in reality. So to make it as though it's a party wall, I'm simply going to select it and then click the move button, and then see if I can find the midpoint at the end there, but sometimes it won't snap to that. You can see it's not picking up the triangle, which tells us it's the midpoint, but we know the thickness of this wall, it's 250. So I'm simply going to click a base point anywhere, and then move the cursor down in the direction I want it to go and type 125. So that should now be centred exactly over the boundary. There are other ways of aligning it. You could use the align tool to do that as well, but that method works. Or you could do the maths. I mean, there are lots of ways. So, okay, so I've got my wall in the right position, and now I want to make a wall that's going to create our passageway, just using the same wall type, so using the wall tool. It's still got the wall type I made earlier, and I'm going to then simply change the height of that wall to level 1. So it's going to finish at level 1. And I'm going to start on the corner there and take that over to the right to that rear wall.
It doesn't matter if you work on the top of the ground floor, if you do want to change the height.
Oh yeah, so it starts on ground floor and then the top is level 1, but the base is ground floor. Yeah, so it always picks that up from the floor level, yeah, that you're drawing on.
So that outer wall does have to be moved.
Yeah, it should be, yeah, especially if you're going to do the passageway, because otherwise the passageway would be too narrow. I mean, even now it's still pretty narrow. But look, I've got a place where we've got a 700 passage and it works. Yeah, so 625, it is pretty narrow, but with this building, I think you don't want to make it any wider than that because you're so pushed for space anyway. And you can get them down. I've actually had an old place where it was a bit narrower than the one I've got now, and we had to buy special wheelbarrows and things to get down this. It was about 550 or something. But you can get wheelbarrows that'll fit down there, and you could walk down through it. So it works. So 625, I think that's okay. And so then looking at it in 3D will give you a better idea how it's all working together. We've got that one wall that's lower, and then the rest is still at the full height. Now, I know you'd be tempted to get this wall and make it have the bottom constraint, in other words, on level 1. But I'm not going to do that. Because if you look at the way it's built, that wall would actually continue all the way down to the ground. And it would be belonging to the neighbours. And so you don't need to bring that wall up. You can if you want to, but I don't think it's really necessary. And then the other one you'd be tempted to bring up is this one. You'd be tempted to bring that up the same way to start on level 1. And then you can, of course, see the passageway. And that's maybe not a terrible option, but the better way of doing it is to leave it at that point, and then it gives me a chance to show you this really good option that you have with walls, with any wall, and that's to use this Edit Profile option. So with Edit Profile, you can essentially change the shape of any wall in elevation. So when you've got a wall selected, if you click Edit Profile, you'll see you get the elevation shape, which is generally a rectangle. And so now I can use some great options like pick lines, and I'm going to pick the inside of this wall and the inside of the other wall, so I know where those edges line up with the wall that I'm working on. And then I'm simply going to go and draw an arc in between those two lines. I'm not going to be too fussy about where I start that. I can always move it up or down later. So that gives me a nice little archway, which is the typical way you have these connecting passages that go under another story. And then using trim to corner, I can join those all back together. Oops. And then I'll use split and break that bottom line, so I can then trim either side of that to get my bottoms. and there we are. Tick to finish. And then if it gives you a message about joining, that's fine. I'm going to hit unjoin elements, and now it's messed up this automatic join on the corner, but I'll show you how to fix that back in the plan view. You simply select this wall that has the issue, manually stretch it to the end. That should fix it anyway, but in fact the automatic join should be back to working again. But if it's still got the edge there, you can also use the join tool after that just to tidy it up even further. But that's fine for now, so I've got my nice little passage there. But I'm going to change it, so at some point I'll probably make that, some sort of internal space. But for now I'll leave it like that. And so then what we've got to think about next is the floors and how those floors and the floor construction relates to the walls now. So back on the architecture tab, using the floor tool, notice I've got the ground floor plan open. So with the floor tool, it'll go to the pick walls tool automatically, and I'm going to make it the way these old buildings tend to be, which is, even though it's a slab on the ground, they generally would have the floor structure inside the walls. Normally these days, if it's a slab on ground, the floor supports the walls entirely, so the floor would go under the walls. But again, because it's an older building, we'd assume that the floors sit inside the walls and the walls have their own footings. So again, it's just good to understand the construction a little bit, and that can tell you how to make the floor. And in this case, we simply would pick the inside of all of these walls. Trim to corner. Oh, now, one little thing. This one's gone to the wrong side. No big deal. I can select it and flip it. And then the rest I'll be able to join together now with trim. So that's the internal floor we've got for the ground floor. And then I'll finish it, and we'll have a look at that in a minute in section. But I'm going to go to level 1 now, and we've of course got a different floor shape there, so I'll use the floor tool again and pick the inside of all of these walls as well. Trying just to pick each edge once. If you've got walls that are split, it's better to extend them after picking them, rather than picking them all twice. So there we are, and okay, so then to see how that's all working, I'll go to a 3D view first, and then you can see it's actually fairly tidy now because I didn't bring this wall up. Now, if I had brought the wall up, I would need to stretch it down to cover the floor, but you can see that is actually happening now with the lower floor. And again, it makes you think about all the things that the builders often have to work out on site, because in the old days where you were doing hand drawing and only picking out the parts that you wanted to draw, often they'd avoid showing these things in their drawings, in the architectural drawings, and then the poor builders would have to sort it out. But with Revit, we're the builders, we need to make it right in 3D as well. So here, just to show you, I've selected all the walls using tab to get all of those outer walls highlighted. And now in properties, I'm simply going to change the base offset to -150. So that way my walls are brought down to sit nicely on the ground. And if you look at that now in section, you'll see that. Right, so the walls now, again, come down exactly to the ground level. And then the floor sits inside that set up 150, because that ground floor level is 150 above the ground. So that's going to give us a nice section. And actually one little thing I'll just show you there. We want the floors to show with the same colour as the walls, black. So I'm just going to select one of those floors, go to Edit Type, and then you can see it's actually got the coarse scale fill colour already set to black, but there's no pattern. So yeah, that's right, exactly. Just choose it there, and you'll find solid there is the first one in the list. And then both of those floors are going to change because they're both the same floor type. And there we are. So now we've got the main shell of the building done with the floors and everything, and that gives you a good basis for then starting to put in your design and deciding, if you want to change any of those things. Oh yeah, so there we are. There's one of those things I was talking about where the joining sometimes won't be perfect in the end, but that's where you can then come back and use the join tool and pick those things and see if you can get it to tidy itself up using automatic joins. Otherwise, let's see. It's only a minor thing, but you can definitely get it to work in the end. If that's not working, then you'd have to use the line work tool. We'll come back to that. There are ways of hiding those lines using another tool, but we'll look at that afterwards. Oh yeah, sorry, and one thing I can do there is have a look at this wall, and yeah, it doesn't have the offset, so that's probably going to fix it anyway. That's better, and then well, that pretty much takes care of it. If you're worried about these lines here, in fact I will just show you the line work tool because it's a good one to know about. Up here you've got the line work button, and then you can just choose invisible lines and hide any lines that you want that Revit's showing you that you don't need. And there we are, so nice clean join. That'll do it. So a few pretty advanced things in there because sometimes wall joins can get really complicated, and when we go to the different floor plans, we just want to check that everything's still joining in a nice and neat way. We'll spend more time on this later, but it's a pretty involved thing, and it makes you realise what Revit's doing for you automatically. It's got special options for joining walls, as well as the join tool and a few other options that happen without you noticing at first. But then when you need to do unusual things, you've got to customise those options. And then also think about things like your floors and how they connect to walls. And so again, check those in section. So the last thing I'll show you there, we've looked at the section that was there, the long section. But it's a good idea at this point to make a cross section. So I'll flip that so it's looking towards my arch, and then go and have a look at that view, and we can see there, yeah, that's a nice neat section with everything joining fairly neatly. Again, you can customise that as much as you need to, but if you can get it working with the automatic options, that's always good. So yeah, hopefully that'll help you, and then yeah, next week we should be able to get the roofs done pretty quickly, and that's going to give you the whole building. But even at this point, you can definitely start laying out your design, and if you're going to do that, just make sure you don't use the same big, thick, chunky wall. Of course, you're going to use thinner partitions, and again, because it's a small building, we want to get them as small as possible, and you can go down to a stud 70. Yeah, yeah. You can go a little bit smaller with steel framing. You can go down to, I think 57 mil is about the smallest. They might have a little bit smaller, but yeah, so 57, and then if it's 10 mil either side, then that's still, no, they must be able to go, yeah, that's 77, so, yeah, so I would say you can go to 70 though. Yeah, I mean, it's pushing it, they're wobbly walls, it's not the greatest thing, so if you can do 90, that's much better. But, yeah, we'll say you can do...
You want to do a generic 100 mil?
No, well, they're thicker, that's all. So stud 70, I'd say for this building, we'll say that's all right. So they're going to be nice little thin partitions. But for your interior walls, that's all right. And so notice when you draw them, they'll be coloured, which is good because you don't want them to be black. And that way, the existing walls stand out really clearly as being the black ones, and then the rest are proposed.